Hi everyone, how's it going? I wanted to sit down today, I have a bit of a cold, so excuse my voice, and just share a few classic novels that I recommend you read this autumn. Last year, I made a more comprehensive list of autumnal literature, as I called it. I described what I thought autumnal literature is, and it's so much more than just being set in autumn and being about, the coziness of autumn, encompassing all the stereotypes of autumn. It's so much more than that. So if you're interested in sort of my thinking on exactly what is autumnal literature, why are certain books perhaps more enjoyable and more meaningful to read during autumn or during an autumnal season of one's life, not even referring to the season of the year, then check out that video. I'll make sure that it's up here so you can check that out. And I believe I also published my thoughts on Substack. I'll leave that in the description box below as well. I'm not going to repeat all of that and really get into that today. I want this video to be sort of short and snappy if you're looking for classic book recommendations to pick up and to get into. So the first book that I want to recommend is Villette by Charlotte Bronte. Villette was published in 1853. It is a Victorian Gothic novel that follows Lucy Snow, the sort of quiet, introspective, self-contained Englishwoman who travels to the fictional Belgian town of Villette to work as an English teacher at a girls' boarding school. This is a novel of isolation and exile, of soulmates and unrequited love, of religious tension and conviction, of loneliness and longing. It has some very complex and compelling characters. Dr. John Graham Bretton, Professor Paul Emanuel especially. If you know, you know. It also has a very ambiguous and sort of challenging ending. An ending that is almost left up to you to interpret. I think that's purposeful on Charlotte Bronte's part. I think she had written an ending and people hated it. So she changed it to leave it up to the reader to sort of imagine the outcome in whatever way was most satisfying for them. So that's really interesting, and that ending definitely left me with a lot of questions, and that story followed me for a long time when I read that a few weeks ago. This novel is very atmospheric. We've got candlelit schoolrooms, we've got misty night gardens, we've got violent storms, dark empty streets. We've got the quest for meaning and identity. This is a journey of faith. This is a novel that explores the questions, what is truth? What is true? What is the truest way of living? This is a novel of self-examination, plumbing the depths of one's soul, exploring the deep inner life of Lucy Snow primarily, but also we get glimpses into the inner lives of other characters. And it's a novel of resilience and fortitude, and I just love it. I think I talked about it in a previous video after I had finished reading it, and it blew me away. It was so much more than I expected it to be. That's just Charlotte Bronte for you. Have high expectations for her, and she will always meet them because she's absolutely brilliant, and she's very quickly becoming one of my favorite authors of all time. Although I love her sisters and her sisters' work so much as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about Emily and Anne Bronte and some of their works that I recommend later. The second book that I want to recommend is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I'm actually listening to this right now and I haven't quite finished it. It's my first time ever reading or listening to Dracula. I think I've always just had a hesitation because of the cultural stereotypes. Same with Frankenstein, right? Those images of Frankenstein and Dracula are so ingrained in popular culture and in sort of our culture's imagination, but in a very sort of simplified and unappealing way, at least to me. The original stories, the original novels from which Frankenstein and Dracula first emerge are so much greater than any movie adaptation, any book adaptation, play adaptation, any simplified version that you might come across. And so I highly recommend both of them, but I'll get to Frankenstein later. For now, Dracula was published in 1897, so it's a late Victorian Gothic novel. It's told through a series of diary entries, of letters, of newspaper clippings, etc., which is quite interesting, and it lets you get a look into the personal perspectives and the inner lives of various characters. So essentially, the novel starts out when Jonathan Harker, an English solicitor, travels to Transylvania to assist Count Dracula in purchasing land in England, not knowing who or what Count Dracula is. And a series of very unfortunate events follows. We meet many more fascinating characters. Mina Harker, Professor Van Helsing, who I love because he's this brilliant Dutchman. This book sort of presents this clash between, scientific rationalism, modernity, modern medicine, and all these things. We see the typewriter in this book. It feels very modern in many senses, but then we also encounter an ancient evil. We encounter this supernatural. We encounter demonic reality and things that we in modernity tend to just call superstition and relegate that to the past. This is all interacting in this book. And these scientists, these professors, these modern men are encountering another side of the world, another side of reality. This book obviously sort of embodies the classic horror Gothic atmosphere, right? With its foggy streets, its crumbling castles, its graveyards, its bats at the window at night, its nocturnal hunts. It's everything that you could want in a spooky, sort of horrifying story, but it's also so much more than that. I would argue that it's ultimately a gospel story, a story of hope, a story of the power of good, the power of God, the crucifix. And without getting too much into that, I want to recommend the Literary Life podcast series on Dracula, which explores this idea in much more depth than I can right now. So go check that out if you're interested in understanding what Dracula really is, because it's not about the triumph of evil at all. The third book I want to recommend is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. Wilkie Collins, if you're not familiar with him, he was also a Victorian writer. He was mentored by Charles Dickens and outsold him even. So The Woman in White is a Victorian Gothic novel, but it's also been described as the first and greatest sensation novel. So it's very sensational. It's very much sort of keeps you on the edge of your seat, wondering what's going to happen next. I like the Oxford Edition's description on the back. I'm just going to read that to you now. It says, Walter Hartwright's mysterious midnight encounter with a strange woman, the woman in white, draws him into a vortex of crime, poison, kidnapping, and international intrigue. And I'm almost halfway through. I actually haven't finished this book. I'm thoroughly enjoying it and loving it, and that's why I'm recommending it here. I haven't gotten to the crime, poison, kidnapping, and international intrigue yet, but I can sort of see how we're going to get there. And even though it takes quite some time to build up to that point, Collins does it brilliantly. And I'm just here waiting, excited for it all sort of to explode in a sense. I wouldn't say that sensationalist novels are typically what I reach for. It's not like I crave sensation and really plot-driven stories and, intrigue and crime and action and all these things, but I am enjoying it for what it is. Also notable, Walter Hartwright. I love his last name. Hartwright? The Oxford Edition also says that 2 of the finest creations in all Victorian fiction are in this book. I'm not sure that I fully agree with that statement, but they're referring to Marian Holcombe, who is a very interesting female character written by a man. She's quite brilliant. I think Collins does a great job in exploring the mind of this woman. And then the other one is Count Fosco, who I've just met and I'm just getting to know. I'm not going to say much more about this book because I don't want to give any spoilers, and also I don't even know the spoilers myself yet since I'm not all the way through it. But I do highly recommend it. I think it's a nice atmospheric autumnal novel as well. Number 4 is, no surprise, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Just a reminder that she wrote this when she was 18 years old, and it's absolutely brilliant. And I'm past 18 years old, and man, I wish I could say that I've accomplished this level of brilliance, but I certainly haven't. As I said earlier, Frankenstein is so much more than our cultural stereotypes. It's an utterly profound book that I happily read over and over again, and I hope that if you haven't read it yet, you will, and that this will become true for you as well. So, Frankenstein was written in 1818. It's an early Gothic novel. It's a romantic novel. It's pre-Victoria, pre-the Victorians. I probably should have had it first on my list in that sense. It's similar to Dracula in that it's exploring the limits, or should I say Dracula is similar to Frankenstein, in that, again, we're exploring the limits of science, the responsibility we have with science inquiry. We're looking at what happens when knowledge outpaces wisdom, when we have, knowledge, information, scientific discoveries, but we don't have the wisdom to use them for good. I find that Frankenstein really demonstrates that there is an ethical dimension to the universe, that ethics and morality are not what we make of them. Evil will lead to evil, will be punished and destroyed. But ultimately, the novel is about alienation and human sympathy. What happens when we reject people because we don't like the way they look, or we don't understand them, or we fear them for whatever reason? And what does this rejection do to the human soul? And then what does it mean to even have a human soul? Because the monster does. He has this human soul in all its complexity. He has this deep desire to be loved and accepted. When he doesn't receive those things, he also has the darker proclivities of the human soul, the desire to repay evil with evil, the desire to have revenge. Again, this has, the ultimate Gothic atmosphere. We've got dark laboratories, alpine glaciers, the cold, hard north, the polar wasteland, violent storms, and it's all contrasted with the lush springtime beauty, with the beauty of the natural world when things are well, when evil hasn't been unleashed. This book is just so full of melancholic beauty, of bittersweetness, and the sublime is there. It's present in every page. You stand in fear and in awe of the world of Frankenstein, of Frankenstein's monster, of this brilliant work of Mary Shelley. Yeah, I love it so much, and I actually get to teach it this year to grade 9 students, and I'm so looking forward to that. We should be starting in October, which is going to be absolutely fabulous. And I've just learned that there's also a drama production of this book happening locally, so hopefully I can get tickets for that. I think it opens on October 17, and then there's a show Halloween night, which I think would be fabulous to go to. Okay, 5th recommendation is The Professor by Charlotte Bronte, published in 1857. This is another teacher story, and I'm going to show that there's lots of parallels between this book and Villette and even Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. The Professor follows William Crimsworth. Similar to Lucy Snow, he's an Englishman who leaves England for Belgium. He goes and teaches in a foreign country and encounters, people who are different than him, who speak a different language, different branches of Christianity. Instead of falling in love with another teacher, he falls in love with a student. It's kind of an odd professor-pupil romance, but if I'm remembering correctly, it's not inappropriate in a really obvious or disgusting way, because nothing happens between them and the student grows up and then they sort of become equals. The student's name is Francis Henry, with whom William Crimsworth shares mutual respect and intellectual sympathy. And intellectual sympathy, this sort of meeting of minds as well as souls, is one of my favorite themes in Gothic literature and in literature in general, and it recurs again and again in many of these Gothic stories that I'm recommending, and especially in the Bronte's writing. Think Jane Eyre and Rochester, this meeting of minds. Now we have it between Crimsworth and Henry, we had it between Lucy Snow and Paul Emanuel, to some degree, although that was perhaps a more complex case. This book has a strong concern with teaching, with study, with personal discipline. We also have religious tension between Catholicism and Protestantism. We have the self-supporting female, the intellectual female. We have moral realism. Our choices in life can seem so complex, and our situations can seem so morally gray, but ultimately what is right, even when it's most difficult. And Charlotte Bronte has many characters, such as Jane, choosing to do the right thing even though it's the most difficult thing, following their moral convictions rather than choosing the easier way and choosing what they want at heart. They follow a higher standard than their own desires, and I just think that's brilliant, and I love to see that coming through in Charlotte Bronte's work and in her sister's work as well. I feel like I'm gushing so hard about the Brontes, but I just can't help myself. They're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. Okay, so those are the 5 books that I wanted to recommend specifically, but I have, a whole list of other hearty recommendations for you. Books that are similarly great for autumn because of their sort of Gothic atmospheres, their school settings, themes of study and learning and science and literature and academia, but also their exploration of the darker side of human life and of reality. And so here is that list. And many of these I'm sure will not be surprises at all, but maybe some will be new to you. So, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, Little Men by Louisa May Alcott, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, The Last Man by Mary Shelley, The Italian by Anne Radcliffe, The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe, The House of Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne, The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, Faust by Wolfgang von Goethe, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving, Inferno by Dante, The Life of Charlotte Bronte by Elizabeth Gaskell, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky, Memoirs from the House of the Dead by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I didn't even really get into Russian literature in this video, but they are also very realistic in their explorations of the dark side, so I highly recommend Dostoevsky specifically, but also many of the other Russian writers. Okay, that's where I want to end this video. This is meant to be short and pithy without getting too deep into these books, because then I find that I always end up spoiling them, and I don't want to do that if you're going to pick up one of these for the first time. Let me know if you've read these books, what you think of them. Let me know if you have any classic reading recommendations. Drop them in the comments below. Check out the video that I mentioned earlier that I made last year, which has a more exhaustive list if you've read all of these or none of these titles are appealing to you. Thank you so much for being here. If you like my work and my channel and you like to support me, there are ways to do that in the description box as well. Leave a like on this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.